2 movies, 3 rounds, 1 winner. Welcome to the Movie Battle Podcast. Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Movie Battle Podcast, Horror Season Edition.
I didn't know it was hockey season.
I'm joined by Senator Kett.
Bob Dole.
And I'm Kang. I couldn't remember what the next line was, so...
Well, you were Bill Clinton. If I'm Bob Dole, you're Bill Clinton.
I just remember that bit. Senator Kett. Anyway, latest edition.
Yes, it is. Well done. Will we leave it there?
We'll leave it there, so...
We'll leave it there, so...
Thank you.
And good night. But while we're here, we may as well...
add
a little epilogue.
Yes, a very long epilogue. Far longer than the actual episode.
Indeed.
We're really losing it here.
It feels very Python-esque. Where the episode where they replayed, it was like 25 minutes in the episode, and then it was like, and now for those of you who missed it, here's the entire episode again, and then they play the entire episode and fast forward up to the end.
I thought you were going to say they just played I'd love to just actually play the episode again. Probably didn't have that allocated that time.
Well, no, they only had half an hour, so... Yeah. Okay, so, back on topic?
Yeah, back on topic. Yeah, so the next episode is 1931 Dracula versus 1931 Frankenstein.
Directors?
The directors have gone over my head, actually.
Lame. You had one job. One of them... it's James Whale directed Frankenstein.
Yeah, Frankenstein.
And who directed Dracula? Quick Google.
It was in my head earlier today, but this...
I'm Googling it 1 second. This is scandalous. What is this, episode 7?
I don't even know anymore.
It is episode 7. And an episode... I was reading recently that if a podcast makes it past episode 7, then it's here to stay. And so many podcasts die up to the 7th episode.
So did they get to the 7th, or is it just before they get to the 7th?
I think 7th is like the last one they do.
So there's still a chance of us dying out.
There's still a chance.
This one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's always a chance.
Yeah.
Especially when Dracula is about it. And it was directed by Todd Browning, and Carl Freund was uncredited. Okay, that is who directed it.
You hadn't seen either. Oh, you had seen Frankenstein. You hadn't seen Dracula.
I think I had seen Frankenstein, but there was parts of it that I didn't remember or didn't. I think I may have seen it once, but
probably just hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
Often, if it seems to once or twice, there's a lot of stuff you'll forget.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, these are two of the most iconic characters in the history of film, let alone horror, just in film. So it's impossible not to know almost everything about them. And then obviously on top of that, they're also two of the biggest just horror novels ever written.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the case that even if you haven't seen the film, if you've only seen like once or twice, or you've never seen it, and obviously, as you said, you'll still know a lot about Frankenstein's monster and Dracula, but the other characters is where kind of like you're not sure what their part is to play in it a lot of the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
that's kind of where you're
that's true. That's true. I mean, but the tropes are well established, like well established. Basically, every vampire since has followed the rules laid out by Bram Stoker and Mr. Browning. Kind of similar to how, Lord of the Rings set the rules for fantasy, and basically every fantasy series has followed them since. It's that kind of impact. But yeah, everyone listening to this knows who Dracula is and the impact it had, and same as Frankenstein's monster. But we dive into round 1, music.
This is going to be a pretty brief round.
I do have a couple of things to say. Okay, so we're assuming if you're listening to this, you've seen the movies, right? So, going in why
And
this is going to be a short round.
if you haven't seen them, just literally take you 5 minutes to hear the music.
Yeah,
If that,
the soundtrack for both films will take you 10 minutes.
if that, I'd say
Yeah.
probably less.
Okay, so neither film have a soundtrack. They both have a theme, an opening theme, and Frankenstein has
Closing
a
theme.
closing theme. But on Dracula's, I'll be honest, I was really shocked when it started because like I'm a fan of Tchaikovsky. Like I know Tchaikovsky, and I know Swan Lake. Um, and I was not. I mean, I'm not an expert or anything, but like I have heard it and I've enjoyed it. Um, but I was really surprised to hear that open Dracula. I was expecting something more gothic, maybe more organy.
Mm.
I'm not saying it was a bad choice. It took me a while to kind. I mean, I'd say it took me a while. It was only 3 minutes, but at first I was like, "Huh, okay." And you probably heard me. I was like, "Jeez, I was not expecting that." Um, but I think it's because I was so familiar with the piece beforehand. But as it played on, I kind of got it. I got why they chose it. It did feel, but by the last minute or so, I kind of understood the feel like that they were going for and why it worked.
There's three things for me I haven't. Like, it has an air of being mysterious. It has a slightly kind of alluring vibe to it as it crescendos. And then as it closes, there's that kind of, it's like a warning almost. It's very kind of harsh, which kind of like, I felt kind of was like when Reinfeld is warned by the villagers.
Is that Renfield?
Or Renfield, sorry. Is warned by the villagers. It's kind of that warning. So I feel it kind of touched on components of the film and themes that you will experience as you watch the film. So even though it was quite brief and it's only that little bit, it did kind of work.
I agree. And as I said, like as it went on, I kind of got it. I understood why they chose it more, and that's probably exactly what you're saying. You know that it does start to kind of echo or preempt the emotions and what they're going for in especially the opening scene when they arrive at the village. One thing I did kind of notice because I didn't know going in that they didn't have a score. You obviously did.
I had forgotten, to be honest.
Had you forgotten as well? Okay, because I think as I said I'd seen Frankenstein, but I had forgotten they didn't have a score. But it took me a while to realize there's no score in this film. Like it took me, and I'll be honest, I would say at no occasion, at no point in the film that I think it really needed a score there.
Yeah, I think for both films, it works in their favor for quite a few scenes. Not having music, like I'm not saying the music wouldn't have worked in certain moments, but there's certain moments in both films where I felt like the silence almost it adds to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in any good film, there's going to be moments of silence and there's going to be moments of music, and I'm sure, and I'll get onto this in a second. I'm sure you can do music in this film and it work, but what my point is that there wasn't music and it still worked. Like it, because we're in post production of a short horror film we'll be releasing in a couple of weeks' time, and
get that in there.
It's called Chantier, and we're literally just looking for music for our film at the moment. And when I watch it back without the music, it's clearly lacking. I think you'd agree. Like there are scenes where you're like, oh, we need music because that is just not working without it. This film and Frankenstein both don't have that. I never once thought, oh, we need music because that's fallen very flat there. Didn't happen. I mean, I think music was. They actually commissioned, Philip Glass did a score for Dracula in 1998, I believe. And
can you watch that?
Yeah.
I'd like to see it.
They released it, I think, on home video and VHS, and then also on DVD. They released it with option. I don't know if it's on your Blu-ray if the option is to play it with Glass's score or not. So when I read that, I was just reading that, and I googled it. Then I watched a clip on YouTube, and it was a scene with where Renfield, drinks the wine, and the wives come in, and he collapses. And it was beautiful because Philip Glass, and he did Truman Show. Am I thinking
Yeah,
something?
he did,
Yeah,
and he also did Candyman.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, he's an amazing composer. Um, and like what I heard of it, I listened to some of it then afterwards on Spotify, and I really liked it actually. So I definitely want to go back and watch it. But overall, I felt that obviously we only have the opening theme, but the film didn't fall down for lack of music.
Mhm. Yeah, as I said, I kind of touched on what I
Yeah,
thought the
yeah,
music
yeah.
brought to it, and then also the silence in it worked as well. So I think I'd just be kind of repeating myself if I kind of,
Yeah, no, no, that's fine. We'll move on to
So
Frankenstein.
yeah.
So I felt that the opening theme was less distinctive. Obviously, as I said earlier, I knew that piece by Tchaikovsky beforehand. This is not a piece that I'd ever heard before, and it felt, which it is harsh to say, a very samey of classic Hollywood. But I can't help. I mean, they do tend to kind of merge together. You put that up and you put a passage from King Kong, and I'm not gonna know which is which.
Mm. Yeah, I just said that on the music for the opening on Frankenstein. It's I could again sense there's a little bit of kind of disaster in there, and there was also a little bit of kind of I felt like absurdity at times in the music, which maybe kind of was a nod to kind of the situation of trying to bring a dead body back to life. But I didn't get as much of a sense of what's in the film from the music as I did with the opening of Dracula.
No, yeah, it felt
Um,
generic to me.
but as I said, then though, um, it had the same use of the silence worked on a lot of the scenes to create tension and horror, which we'll obviously get into in the next round. Um, but yeah, that's again, there's not more I can really say on it. So much.
Yeah, well, one thing I would say is that it also has a closing theme, and actually I preferred that. I thought it fit the emotion at the end. And
I disagree. I kind of felt the opening fit the emotion a bit, or fit the sense of the film a bit more than the closing. But
see, for me, I'll explain why. Because, and I'm kind of spoilers for the end of our review, if that's a thing. But I hated the ending of this film. I'll explain why later. I won't go into details now. But it like they ended with a happy theme, and which I found infuriating. Um, but in some ways, it compounded the tragedy of the creature. Well, actually, it was Boris Karloff preferred. A lot of people call it Frankenstein's monster, but Boris Karloff, when we saw the documentary there the other night, he was saying he always referred to it as the creature. So I will, in his honor, refer to it as the creature as much as I can in this, unless I forget. Um, yeah, so it hammered home that you know what it reminded me of. The ending of this reminds me of Shylock in Merchant of Venice, where the audience, I feel, is supposed to be happy for Antonio. Antonio, who's the other guy?
yeah, Antonio, yeah, was,
Yeah, for Antonio, and hate Shylock. But I don't like Antonio, and I felt bad for Shylock. I feel Frankenstein's creature is the Shylock of this story, and Henry is Antonio. Like, we're supposed to be happy for him at the end with his wife. Like, I couldn't care less about him, to be honest. In fact, the opposite. I wished him a bad death. But I felt the happy theme compounded my anger at. So in a way, I felt it actually worked really well. But I don't know if that. See, we'll go into that later. We'll go into later about the themes and the intentions of the closing scene. But yeah, that's me on music. We ready to vote?
really direct.
You want
to? That? No, I'm done.
Okay, okay. So you ready to vote?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you want to go for?
I'm gonna go with Dracula.
Okay.
I said just to recap over, just that it gave more in its opening and felt more relatable to what we saw in the film. more so than what Frankenstein did. That's the only reason, really. Because both the music is brief in both films, obviously, but that was what gave it to Dracula.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think Dracula is. I mean, it fit it better, but it's also just a better piece of music. It's captivating. I mean, obviously, it's unbelievably memorable. Swan Lake is one of the most famous pieces of, I think, 20th century classical music, of all time. So yeah, I mean, there's no doubt it's a greater piece of music, and I think I agree with you. I think it fit the story better as well. Oh, and just to point out, the score of Frankenstein was composed by Bernard Cowan. Forgot to throw that in earlier.
Oh, I see, because he's a musician.
But yeah, but I vote for Dracula. Yeah.
Okay, so Dracula takes the lead.
Takes the lead. Takes indeed a lead. Okay, so we will move on to round 2. Horror.
Which yeah, which is, as I said, which last week, like, it kind of it makes sense to have that as a category, just simply because of the films we're doing.
I don't think we have to explain why we're discussing horror in the 2 greatest, oldest horror franchises in the history of cinema.
Fair enough.
just dive in, Liam.
Yeah. So again, it's with both films, really, they're atmospheric. I mean, they're all of a certain time. Obviously, they come out in the early 30s. So if you're looking at it from a certain angle, they're not scary films in that, you're not going to be like terrified watching these films. But they do conjure up a real sense of an atmosphere. They're very gothic, But there are certain moments that like are creepy and kind of are unsettling. Just an example, even if you when Renfield is coming in the carriage and you see there's 2 ladies looking out the window and there's this like look in their eyes and there's like people praying, and the fact that they're so adamant for him not to go in the castle and don't leave at night, the fear that has been built around this Dracula, this figure. You really get a sense of kind of the power he has, even with people that he hasn't personally affected, but just from hearing things about him. There's a real sense of aura and mystique and power about him. So yeah. that was striking.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I kind of disagree with what you're saying. I agree with the last part of what you said, very much so. But the first part about it not being horror, like, or not
I didn't say it wasn't horror,
not being that scary, I disagree. I found Dracula really creepy and eerie in this film.
Oh, I didn't say it wasn't eerie, and there's a lot of tone there, and it's a great film to watch come up to Halloween, like.
I think I think that a lot of modern horror films should go back and watch this, and take note of how to do subtle horror. Like, there's not one jump scare in this film. There's no things jump out at you and loud noise. Oh God, I jumped because there was a loud noise. There's none of that. It's genuine emotion. Like you say, they set him up so well. When Renfield arrives into the village, and the fear is palpable. Like, everyone is on edge, even before they find out where he wants to go. And then he wants to go at midnight. And like you can see in their faces, like you say, how afraid they are. And like there's one character, or one villager in particular, the woman, when she hands him the crucifix and says, "Wear this for your mother's sake," and you really feel. I thought she delivered that line excellently, and I really feel her fear, but also her love, in a way, like her love for her fellow man. That she was genuinely worried about this man. Like, she knew he was going to his doom. She knew that there was no good ending to this journey. That's why they begged him not to go, and that's why. And I thought that set him up perfectly. I loved that opening scene. I thought it was really, really well done. And I even, like you were saying, these are villagers that maybe not directly. I'm sure probably some of their villages were taken. I mean,
possibly, yeah.
I'd say they definitely were, because if you look as he's going back up the hill, and you probably see them coming down, but I only noticed them when they were going out of the village. Massive crucifix at the edge of the village. Yeah, and then obviously, and then you go to.
Well, there's a shot before Renfield gets to the castle. There's a shot of Dracula kind of awakening, and you see his wives coming out, and there's two of them walking, and there's one of them just standing there, she's not moving, she's just staring, and it's really unsettling. Just as a visual, it's just like it's just really strange.
Yeah, very ghost-like.
Yeah.
But they don't say a word in the entire.
But the one in particular who's just kind of standing there, she's not moving. On the right, there's two of them walking up, and one of them just standing there.
That's what I'm saying. That is horror. That's scary.
I'm not saying it's not horror. I didn't say it wasn't horror. And it's great. It's great. It's a really good atmospheric film. I just feel because it came out in the early 30s, because all the stuff that come out since, at times it can seem tame. That's all I'm saying. But I'm not saying that there wasn't great tone in it.
Yeah, but I don't think you need to be over the top to be scary.
No, you don't. No, you don't at all. And I agree. You don't need jump scares to make things scary at all.
And you don't need blood and gore to be scary.
No, you don't.
It's about atmosphere, which this film is chock full of, and I often think as well as like we said it with King Kong. Can you imagine going into the cinema in 1931? Never having seen, a horror film. I mean, you pretty much. I mean, I don't know what kind of horror they had in the silent era, but any of the silent films I'm aware of, they weren't horror films. They were largely comedies. But I could be wrong on that. So apologies to all the great lost horror silent films that I'm not aware of. But you go into that and like, there's no way that. You walk out the same person. Like, you're just gonna be like, what did I just watch? Like, that's gonna be akin to, as I say, King Kong, akin to maybe Jurassic Park. That kind of the first time we saw.
Would just blown their minds.
Yeah, and I'm
like
saying is the fact that Dracula has been so overdone, so parodied, so ripped off, so many sequels, so many crap B-movie sequels, that it still grabbed me. Like, when you see Bela Lugosi's eyes, you don't forget. Like, I mean, I know we see it earlier when he starts hypnotizing the characters, and like, you totally believe it. Like, those eyes are hypnotic. I've never seen like a stare like that on screen before. It's incredible screen presence.
I love the when Renfield arrives at the castle and you do kind of the creaky again, like you were saying, it's all the cliches that have been done to death now, but at the time the door opening and he walks in, the sheer vast size of the castle just engulfs him.
The sets are fantastic as
unbelievable.
Well. But you know what I loved as well, just before he goes in, is when Dracula disappears, the driver's gone, it's just the back there.
Yeah.
That was a lovely little touch. I really like that. But yeah, when he goes in and then you see Dracula descend those steps.
What was nice was he doesn't see him.
Yeah.
He turns because he sees he hears something. He looks back and then you just see Dracula walking down, and it's like because he makes reference later about with the spider and the web, and he says about the spider needs to feed on the blood or to live or something like that. Yeah, and obviously it's an analogy for what he intends to do.
Yeah, like
Renfield is the fly.
There's a massive web at top, and also the fact I love that Dracula passes through the web without tearing it, but Renfield has to chop it down. I don't know how popular visual metaphors were back then. I could be doing a disservice to films of the era, but I imagine that was maybe among the first kind of those in cinema. I could be wrong there. I should do more research.
What's interesting as well is when I kind of that shot when you see the castle, like how big it is, it almost you're transfixed by it, which is kind of what Dracula does to his victims,
Which I forgot to mention how cool that matte painting of the castle was when the carriage is going up. That looks phenomenal. Like all the land is so barren and dead. Like that is that is what he and the wives are, just dead. And there's no is there like even a tree? There's maybe a couple of trees, but there's no grass growing. There's no crops growing. Certainly not. I mean, obviously he's a rich count. He's got probably hundreds of hectares of land, but
as well, even just kind of like because we were talking about the soundtrack and lack of music, right? So the kind of the silence in the castle becomes so undeniable,
Mm.
and that kind of strikes up the
Yeah, because
tension more.
any sound that he hears, like the
Yeah.
wolves howling,
Yeah, yeah,
or
very
the
much
flutter
so.
of the bats,
Yeah.
or even Dracula himself, his voice,
Mm.
like
But
what
he,
a
or,
voice.
but he, or even his voice was fantastic. Or I love his line about listen to them, children of the night.
Children of the Night.
What
I mean,
what
there's so
music they
many
make.
lines from this film as well, like that are just so iconic, and they still work. That's what amazes me is that like these are lines that you've maybe heard 100 times, and I've never seen this film before, and I've heard maybe 100 times. Heard it sampled in music and heard it parodied in in children's
Mm.
cartoons, and it still worked. Like it still, I thought was powerful. Hearing it.
Um, even like as well, like when he kind of like opens the coffin to come out again, it's all kind of it's like a silent movie nearly in a way,
Mm.
because there's no sound and it's something
That's
very
clear as well, because even the
yeah.
first time I noticed the similarities to a silent film was actually the makeup, how thick the makeup was. It got to do, I think, with the type of film they were using, or maybe the type of lenses. I'm not sure, but they had to wear really, really, really heavy makeup, otherwise they couldn't really be seen. And that's why, often, if you look at silent films, in particular, their faces look quite weird.
Mm.
They look quite off. But also like they took a lot of stuff from kind of theater and then put it onto camera.
Well, even their movements was very theatrical. A
Oh,
lot,
massively. But almost all of those actors would have been theatrical
Yeah.
actors. And it's clear, like it can be quite over the top at times,
Mhm.
but also like because this, I'm not like they're doing what talkies as they refer to them, maybe a couple of years at this point. Like they're still, you can see they're still trying to find out how to do it, how to
Mm.
transition, and a lot of great silent movie stars careers just died up once audio came in. You could hear record sound.
There was two visuals I found quite striking as well. Of so when when Lucy is like in her bedroom at the window and you just
Mm,
see him kind of just staring up at her.
yeah.
Again, it's kind of thing that he's targeted kind of his next victim, but more so it was when Renfield maid collapses, she faints, and he kind of he's like literally like a spider, but also like what's Bray Wyatt. When he does his finishing maneuver, the way he kind of
I don't.
yeah, but he kind of moves the way he contorts his body. It's like the way he went over anyway was like a spider. The way he kind
Mm.
of crawls over.
Oh
It
yeah,
just
yeah.
was
That, that
really
that that was a fantastic shot
yeah.
when Renfield crawls over.
It was an
It,
easy target for him because I said
I
she
feel like I've
collapsed. Like,
seen that shot 100
mm,
times in other films. Um, just the monster, for want of a better word,
yeah.
crawling towards the victim.
I have to say that like for me the most in terms of the horror and the tension, I found the stuff in the castle the best at the beginning. That was when Renfield goes in. That was
It,
my favorite aspect.
it's the most
Yeah,
atmospheric.
it is very much.
Yeah.
I love that.
I do. I did find the film starts slowing down. If it starts getting a little by the numbers as it goes along,
Mm.
like with Van Helsing getting in. I don't know, we'll get into him later in
Mm-hmm.
characters, but I'll be honest, he kind of irritated me a little bit. I found him very boring.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing really about him that was interesting.
But we do that in characters anyway.
Yeah, but we'll go into that later. Um,
That's all. I'm kind of. That's me
yeah,
on horror anyway. I don't know if you know.
there's a couple little bits that I liked. One was the reflection in the mirror scene
Mm.
with the reveal. That
Yeah.
was a great, because again, like people watching this don't know there are the rules
The
of
rules of
vampires, right?
yeah.
So I loved that scene. It was so subtle, like the way they shot it. It was shot really well.
You wouldn't like. I didn't see it coming either. To be honest.
No, yeah, you don't think? I think I did when I saw the mirror coming up, because I don't know why, but I did kind of see it. But I loved it. I thought it worked really, really well. And there's also like some kind of shots. There's a shot of Lucy when she's just walking on the street when she's the Lady of White. Just some of the imagery, and you see the shot of the beautiful kind of huge gates, and there's maybe a policeman, and she's walking along the street of the Lady of White. Just some of the beautiful visuals. Same with the wives when Renfield is passed out and they're gliding over towards him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that was
he comes
strange.
out of the mist.
Yeah.
Um, it's really really powerful, classic image. Like it did look beautiful as stills, blown up on, as a poster on the wall or something. Like you could frame a lot of these frame stills, but yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I love the fact, as I said earlier, that there were no jump scares. There was a real subtlety to the
Oh,
horror.
yeah.
But yeah, we'll move on to Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Okay. I loved the intro. The intro where like there's
Oh,
the
yes.
warning.
Yeah, yeah.
I love that, and it's another classic example of Simpsons references that I never got as a child.
But also, again, has the theater aspect as well, like the
Yeah,
announcing
very
show.
much so, very much so. Yeah. But it's just a great little idea to like, we warned you.
Mm.
Like it's
Yeah, it's tongue in cheek.
um,
For me, like this, the horror in Frankenstein is all about the foreboding kind of sense of it. Like most of the eerie kind of moments, it's all kind of, it's like it builds and builds. Like just even just something small, like for example, when Frankenstein's working on the body, and you just kind of see the hand hanging
yeah,
on the table, even though it's before, it's a couple of maybe about 2 minutes before he actually comes to life, but just seeing the hand hang there, you just sense life in it, even though you know it's not alive yet. You know what I mean? Just little things like that, or even like when you hear the footsteps approaching. When he's talking to the professor, and he's like, "Listen, you just hear the footsteps coming, about to get the reveal of what he looks like." It's very just, like I said, just that sense of kind of foreboding sense of what is to come.
yeah. It was subtle as well.
Yeah.
Like, but I also really liked the scenes where the grave digging. Like there was something just very kind of unnerving about that, and especially the scene with the gallows with the man hanging.
Yeah.
That was quite a horrifying image.
Yeah.
It
Well,
was
so was when they find Fritz. Oh.
yes, yeah, no, definitely. But one thing as well, just before we kind of go on to kind of near that I really liked was two things actually in the intro. The eyes, the eyes they had in the intro. Did you notice them in the
No.
background?
No.
They had these like illustration of these eyes from different shapes and kind of different angles, and it was really psychedelic. And I'm very, I mean, and surrealism, not psychedelic, sorry, surrealism as an art movement, kind of started becoming big around the time this came out. And I wonder if it was influenced by surrealism, like Dali did, the Persistence of Memory, painted that the same year this came out. I wonder if surrealism influenced that piece. And it also really reminded me of the dream sequence from Spellbound, the Alfred Hitchcock film that Dali did design, and it's got all these eyes featured. And this is what I think about 14 years before that, but it just really struck me. The other thing I loved in the credits was it says the monster and then it says question mark.
Yeah, it was
I
cool.
loved that.
At the end, then it does give his
It
name.
does give a name at the end, but again, similar to the intro, it's a great way of just setting up like, oh, what's going on here? What this is going to be different? It's going to be
Mystery
something
and
interesting.
intrigue.
I like that little kind of play with the audience, almost breaking the fourth wall, in a way. But yeah, the Fritz scene. I mean, to be honest, Fritz is
Well,
such
he
a
brings it on himself, like.
he is a
Yeah.
horrific character. The horror. I mean, the horror for me. I mean, I like to say like the subtle, the arm hanging down and the sound of the footsteps coming up. But that again, like Dracula, that close up look of those dead eyes. I mean,
He looks very menacing.
it is an unnerving image. And it still struck me, even though it's an image
You
every child has seen or every person
you
has
also
seen.
see his shadow on the wall when Henry's kind of beckoning him to the chair,
Yeah,
and like even though he towers over him, but the shadow really towers over, and it kind of again it's like another kind of a dimension of kind of the power and size of him, because later it's kind of almost like it's kind of like, as I said, that kind of sense of foreboding where later in the film he does attack Henry and they do those scuffles and he's like very much overpowering him. It's like a kind of a sign of things to come in a way.
yeah. And you wonder, does he kind of not realize how strong he is for a while? Like because he's learning everything.
Yeah.
I mean, even like that scene where he learns what sunlight is.
Yeah.
A lot of very moving scenes in this. It's a very emotional film.
Just going back to the hand again, when the professor's working on him after they've said he'll put him humanely put him down, remember?
Well, I don't know.
Well,
about
that's what he was intended. But then the hand kind of
he said dissect him.
yeah, did he?
Yeah.
Okay. Because he said to me you put him down humanely.
They kept injecting him. They kept coming back to life. She's going to dissect him. That's not.
Oh no, but he did say to Henry, I'll put him down humanely. He did say that to him.
Yeah, but he also says put him down like a dog, or put him down like an animal.
But when his hand is slowly kind of coming up, and also you see his eyes opening, again, it's that thing of that build. You know what's coming, but it's that weight, that makes it very creepy and uneasy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, when you see something, and the audience knows something, and the person and the receiving end doesn't, I think it's almost always scarier than when we learn at the same time. That's it can work, obviously. Reveals can work very well, but so often it's used just with a loud pang of music and it's a jump scare, and we've all seen Psycho. I mean, Psycho did it perfectly, and since from then on, it's just kind of been like worse versions of Psycho. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Jaws. Jaws did sharks. You can't do sharks after Jaws. What's the point? Jump scares, I just really find them irritating.
Well, like an example of not using the jump scares, like, so when Elizabeth is in her room, because they hear that the monster's in the house, and he said, "No, you stay in the room, dear," and you see Frankenstein's monster in the background coming in the window, and that's on what that, like, you could picture like in a modern day horror possibly. They just have her turn and then boom, he's just there. But you see him come in the window, you see him follow her. She still hasn't noticed it. And again, it's like the scene with the professor before he dies. We see it, but the character hasn't seen it yet. And
subtlety is scary.
Yeah.
Subtlety is, it's certainly eerie.
And again, it's that thing in the background. I always think about stuff in the background. So he comes in from the background, the back window, and you're like, oh my god, what's he going to do here?
Yeah.
It's very creepy. And it's like, you're scared for her.
Yeah. No, definitely. Then, of course, we go on to Maria. That's a scene and a half.
Well, just the shot of the father carrying the lifeless body. I mean,
well, that, but also even before that, what really struck me was that he didn't want to hurt her. He didn't understand what he was doing, and you see the panic in his face. But also the image of him throwing a child in. I mean, it's jarring now.
Yeah, it is.
Like, that's an image that you see it in a film released this year, and I'd be shocked. Especially, as you say, when we cut to the father carrying her through the streets, and you hear the festival going around him, and the music and the dancing, and everyone's laughing and cheering, and then he's walking through distraught.
You do hear as well. It sounds like a child's voice saying, "That's Maria." So probably someone, a friend, or someone. The fact that a child said it made it even more.
It's,
in the windmills, or say the windmill scene, then a different type of kind of horror where it kind of, so when he kind of tries to escape and then the monster spots him and they're going around that kind of I don't know what it was, whatever the thing that was turning on the windmill, whatever the thing was,
it's a windmill, yeah.
Yeah, but what was that thing that was kind of turning or spinning?
That's the windmill.
Whatever it was, yeah, okay. Because they were on either side of it, but it reminded me kind of like an innate fear of being.
Oh, sorry, on the inside.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that was some kind of cog that was turning the windmill. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
But it reminded me of like that kind of just innate fear of being chased by a monster. It's kind of like just like the ultimate childhood terror. You're trying to escape from it and it's after you. That's what I really got from that scene.
Yeah, no, I like that as well. Because there's great framing. Great framing in the entire film. As well, similar to Dracula, both of these films are framed fantastically. But in that there's a great framing where we're cutting between them, and there is kind of a suggestion, like this is father and son. This is maybe a bit of yin and yang, Jekyll and Hyde maybe. There's all kinds of suggestions of that. Like this is the battle of God versus man. This is as Frankenstein or as Henry. It's weird that he's called Henry in this. I mean,
and he has a friend called Victor.
That's really strange. But anyway, it's Henry in this. And I mean, he had that famous line, which we kind of mentioned.
So just in case you haven't read the book, in the book his name is Victor
I
Frankenstein.
think
But I think in most
he almost
adaptations,
everything
it's
he's
Victor as
yeah,
well.
yeah. It's weird that he's Henry in this, but that famous line, obviously, that everyone knows. It's alive, it's alive. Now I know what it feels like to be God, or something like that. I mean, in a way, he is God, and the creature is man. And it's man fighting God. This, as many people often say, like God did a bad job when he made man. And so there's a lot of philosophical avenues you can go into with this that are really quite fascinating. And even maybe we'll get them later, but this was not really horror, so we'll go on from that. But the when he throws Henry down and he seems to like crush his spine.
I think he landed on his stomach.
Was it?
Yeah.
I don't know. The way he landed.
Well, you see him sliding off, see.
Yeah, I know, but no man survives that fall.
I'm not saying it's survivor. I'm just saying that I think it was his stomach that he hit.
Anyway, it doesn't matter what side he landed on. He landed in an excruciating way that surely would have killed him. But it looked extremely violent. And then the howls of fear and pain as he's set on fire, essentially crushed and then set on fire and burns to death. It is.
Well, he doesn't actually, because he does come in the.
Well, we're talking about this film.
No, just saying.
Okay, but we're not reviewing any sequels. We're reviewing this film, and in this film, as far as I can see, he burned to death. It reminded me of The Wicker Man. Even though I've never seen that film, but I'm aware of again, spoilers. I won't say what, but there's a scene that's similar in The Wicker Man. The howls of pain and fear were really, really effective. It struck me, I thought it was really hard to listen to be honest. Hard to watch.
Well, yeah, you could say it was like a hate crime, I suppose, because they were kind of shouting up at him,
He's essentially a child. He's what, a few weeks old?
If that.
It's really cruel ending. But yeah.
But at least you get the happy music.
But really powerful, and I think a horrifying way to end the film. And originally that was the ending.
It might have been a more powerful.
Henry died in the original ending.
So they both died, basically. Well,
yeah, they both die, and the studio suggested to Whale that they change it. They wanted a happy ending, so they filmed the last scene with the barn, and actually Henry.
Well, they established he's recovering, like.
Yeah, but Henry and Elizabeth inside, they're not the original actors. They're different stand-ins because they filmed it after the fact. That was added afterwards. But apparently James Whale liked that. I didn't like it. I think it would have been way better if they just cut it there. Henry dead, the creature dead, and that closing shot, the wide shot of the mill on fire on the hill with the torches, really, really powerful shot. But yeah, even in spite of that last addendum scene, I thought it was a fantastic close to the film. But yeah, ready to vote?
Yeah, picking time.
This is a very, very close one for me, I have to say.
Let me go first. So.
Yeah, go on.
I'm going to go with Frankenstein because, as I said, has a lot of that kind of foreboding sense of the horror to come, which I really liked. And there was more moments for me maybe of that kind of creepy tone of like, the slow approach of the footsteps or the hand slowly coming up or descending upon Elizabeth and her not seeing it, but then and obviously then there's the striking image of the child, the dead child in the father's arms. So I think there was probably more moments of horror that I felt were stronger in Frankenstein. They had more of them, so that's probably my reason for going with Frankenstein.
Yeah, I find it very close. I felt like Dracula was more traditional gothic horror, like it's eerie, very kind of ghost story like,
Mm.
unnerving and creepy. Frankenstein is a tragedy, and it's more emotionally horrifying, kind of what happens to this creature and what happens to Maria in particular as well. Um, yeah, I think I have to give it to Frankenstein though, because it grabbed me more emotionally. I was affected more. I was horrified more by the imagery and the actions going on screen. It's very close, but yeah, I have to give it to Frankenstein.
All square.
So that makes 2-2. 2-2 going into the crucial countdown conundrum. Um, so it's neck and neck as we head in to the home straight. But before we move on to the final round, we just want to plug where you can find us online.
Yeah, so if you want to send us an email, you can find us at themoviebattlepodcast@gmail.com. And you can also find us on Facebook as well with just the Movie Battle Podcast.
Yeah, and then we're on Twitter. Twitter handle is at Movie Battle Pod, POD. And on Twitter, we release, and on Facebook, with every new episode we release each week, we also release a piece of unique pixel art. So you only get them on the social media pages. And then also on YouTube, we have the full podcast on YouTube, and we have an animated intro there if you want to check it out, something a little different. But yeah, okay, so on to round 3, characters. So, characters. I have Mina, Van Helsing, Renfield, and Dracula.
I have Dracula, Renfield, Van Helsing, and Harker.
Harker, okay.
Just a small little bit.
Yeah, okay. Alright, start with Harker, so.
Well, I just have for him like that he's in the film. He's like a lost man who's like powerless to protect the woman he loves. He can't take her away from London. He can't understand why their relationship should be in jeopardy, and he really doesn't see the true influence and threat of Dracula. So I think just that's him in a nutshell. In it, like he's not as prominent as he is in the book, at least from what I've read. But that's kind of the role he plays in it, like
Yeah, he and Mina together really. There's not a whole lot going on.
Not a lot, no. There's some small
they're
moments.
just plot points.
She kind of becomes a little more interesting when she's under his influence.
Yeah, no, she has moments where she's interesting, but I mean overall, then.
Well, what did you said Mina? So what did you have on her?
Just like when you first meet her, like she seems quite laid back, and quite quite jokey. Like with
Lucy.
Lucy, when after they meet Dracula and she's like imitating him, and she's like surprised that like Lucy seems kind of infatuated by him and kind of attracted to him, which is a huge part obviously of Dracula and vampires since then, is that sense of allure, that I mean he only one victim in this film. Well, if you count the ship, then maybe, but that's something he had to do. Renfield he had to do, but the people he wants to prey on are all women.
Mm-hmm.
When he arrives in London, it's all women he's preying on. Which I wonder, when was this written before or after Jack the Ripper? I wonder.
I'm not 100% sure.
I know it was around the same time. I wonder if something like that had an influence maybe on Bram Stoker. It does he feels quite predatory. But anyway, on Mina, so she has that kind of, there's quite a change in her, but then like so when after she's been bitten and we kind of just see her talking, she's quite subdued and she feels very much kind of like a lady of the time, kind of just does as she's told by her father or by a fiance or by a doctor. Doesn't really have any autonomy. But then you do see her kind of come out of her shell later on, when she's under Dracula's chance
Well, she tells him to get
or trance.
Harker to get the crucifix off of Van Helsing.
Yeah, you know, and there is a creepiness to her in those imageries, and there's some great imagery as well, like when Dracula calls her, I assume telepathically, and she kind of comes under his cloak. That's a great visual scene, and also later when she's walking with him down to the abbey, again her in white. She is now a lady in white, same as Lucy, and obviously also the same as the three wives he had back in Transylvania as well.
Like I think she's focal to the story, but as a player in it in general, I think like Harker, they're kind of smaller pieces of the puzzle.
In this,
in terms of what they bring to it.
They're parts of the story to move the story along, but they don't actually have. Mina, I suppose, has a bit to her, but I mean, I wouldn't call her an amazing character by any means.
No, she's not like when you think of the best characters. Neither her or Harker would jump at you.
No.
Like they're fine in the film, but they're not like standout characters.
No. Van Helsing.
Yes, Mr. Van Helsing.
Yes,
who is in. The actor is in both, has a role in both films,
yes.
as does the actor who plays Renfield.
Yes,
in both
he
films.
does.
We'll get to him in a minute. Let's go to Van Helsing.
Yeah. So Van Helsing, at first, I mean, again, he's quite odd. So obviously, he's supposed to be, I assume, German. I think. Obviously, Dracula is from Romania, and I think Van Helsing is supposed to be German. So he has a kind of sense of like he's an outsider as well, which is kind of interesting. But he seems he's a bit of a MacGuffin almost, in that like he just happens to have all the right information at the right time, just to move the story along. Like he happens to know everything about vampires, and like he's able to study that a girl had her blood drained. I was like, oh well. It's definitely the undead. Then it's like, what? So I like that the other characters are surprised at this, like Harker and me.
Well, because it's all superstition.
Yeah. But it's just like he never makes a mistake. It feels like.
Yeah, maybe. I guess that it kind of shows as well that he's an open-minded character, and he's not willing to just accept what's seen in front of you, and that there might be more to it. Like the other line where like they're talking about how Renfield, eats insects or something in Nottingham or something like that, and he kind of says, "Well, as far as we know," that's what Van Helsing says. So saying that like that's what we know, but there may be more to it. Like I thought that was an
I'd love liked like maybe if he was researching vampires or like if it was explained that he had hunted vampires back in continental Europe and he has a history in it, and there's a little more of an explanation. It just felt a little too perfect that he would just have this amazing knowledge and he would be in town as Dracula arrives from like he's arriving from Romania to London, and the one guy in England that has a chance of, or one guy in Europe who has a chance of stopping him is there as well. It's a little too.
I do like that
handy.
he engages Dracula in a way that and tries to kind of get to the bottom of who Dracula really is by not going in an aggressive manner. He goes about it in a way that can show his colleagues the truth, but without making Dracula feel like he's under threat. Like the thing with the reflection.
Yeah, that was an interesting choice.
Kind of cool
though. But it felt. I mean, maybe you're right, but it felt to me when I watched it that it felt like he played his cards too early. Like, why not reveal to them what was going on after he left? Like, Dracula knew then that Van Helsing knew who he was. But why not just keep that information secret, explain to them afterwards, and then they'll be able to have an upper hand on Dracula, especially when they know he wants Mina.
There was a cool stare down between them.
I did like that.
That was really cool. Like mono a mono.
That was good. I like that.
Dracula sees him as a legitimate threat.
Yes.
But I like Dracula doesn't get rough. Doesn't allow himself to seem like he's ruffled by it. But obviously he is when he says about about the stake. He said like you need to leave this country now, and he's saying like I'll drive the stake through your heart. And then he goes for him and he has the crucifix ready. So he knows what he's doing. And
You know,
all
yeah,
that stuff was kind of
I
good
did like
stuff.
that, and I like the fact that they had that battle of wits, and
Mm.
that Van Helsing was able to
It
resist
was
him.
like a
So
chess match almost,
yeah,
kind
no,
of,
it
yeah.
was, and there was, and it was showing that the Dracula wasn't all powerful.
Yeah.
Like there were limits to his powers.
Mm.
Yeah, so there were elements of Van Helsing I thought interesting, but I just thought he was a little flat, especially when you compare him to Renfield.
Mm.
Renfield was
Yeah.
incredible. I absolutely loved this character, but I think more so I loved the performance. Dwight Fry
Damon
was
Albarn.
he does
The head of
look a
him.
bit like from Blur, if you're not aware, and Gorillas as well.
Mm.
But he is incredible in this.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he was fantastic. And I'd kind of forgotten how prominent he was as a character in it, because I thought he kind of effed off after the opening kind of sequence. He wasn't in it that much after it. But what was cool was we actually see, because there's a lot of depictions of Dracula, you don't see how Renfield becomes like a slave to Dracula. So I thought that it was cool that they showed that. In a lot of depictions of Dracula, you never see how Renfield, at least that I've seen, you don't see how Renfield becomes a slave to Dracula. So that was cool that they actually showed that, how he comes about.
Yeah, no, well, I'll be honest, I haven't seen many adaptations of the novel. I've never, even though I own both of these books. I've owned both of them for over 2 decades, I think. I've never read either of them, embarrassingly. But the only other sorry, no, that's true, that's wrong. I've seen Nosferatu and I've seen Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola version. Um, I can't. I remember Tom Waits being phenomenal as Renfield actually in Francis Ford Coppola's version as well. Is Renfield in Nosferatu?
Yeah, but he works at the because in the novel and in the Nosferatu version and Nosferatu the Vampire, it's Harker who goes up to Dracula to.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, they changed it.
Yeah.
It's Renfield that goes.
It works though in this.
Oh, it does. Yeah.
It works, and especially when you're dealing with a film that's maybe an hour and 15 minutes long, and you try to compact story.
It brings a lot more. He's very much a tragic character.
Yeah, no, I think it really adds to.
I thought he was
Renfield.
one of the best, possibly the best character.
I think he is the best character in the film. He's the character that when he came on screen, I was enraptured straight away. Now, to be fair, that is true of Bela Lugosi's Dracula as well, and we'll get to him in a second. But there's so many scenes where he's on stage. I'm just like, oh, I could watch. I would love to watch. I've watched a full movie about Renfield. I absolutely would have sat through that no problem whatsoever.
When I was watching it, I was thinking, I was like, I'd love to play that character.
Yeah. But like so many lines as well he has. But like that shot of him, like you said, the tragedy of the character, because we see him as a well-meaning, well-mannered man who's just doing his job, and he gets turned into this maniacal, raving lunatic. We see that shot when they open up the ship and they look down into the lower decks, and he's that smile on his face. Yeah. It's quite unnerving. Like
it kind of shows like that, almost like how far he's been altered by Dracula, and that there may be no way back for him now. Kind of,
and like just the way when the orderly takes away his spider, and he was like. And he started going on his rant about who wants to be flies, and he was the fly, and Dracula is the spider, and he wants to be a spider. That's what he wants. And then, of course, that's like you point out the scene about when he's crawling over towards her, but also the rats. That was what a monologue that was.
Yeah, and also when he's like, it's like midway through the film where he's like, "Oh, please don't ask me to do that, not her." Like, he doesn't want to put these people in harm's way because he knows,
especially Mina. Like he seems to really care about Mina and not want to hurt her. And you can see that underneath him, he's still fighting against Dracula's power, and he does betray Dracula.
He does, yeah. And even though when he says like he's trying to get him to listen to Van Helsing, he says, be guided by what he says, get her out of here. She doesn't want anything bad to come of her. But he's worried. I think because he doesn't fully trust Dracula, and he thinks that Dracula may try and kill him, and if he does, then he can't live with the stuff he's done to innocent people. So it's that dilemma for him. So I think that's possibly why he also treats Dracula like a religious figure, because he's worried that he might be betrayed by God if he dies, that God will disown him.
Well, there is that phenomenal line.
Yeah.
God will not damn a lunatic soul,
Yes,
which I thought was just a
was a great
really,
line.
really great line.
But then he says like
Excellent
how just saying that he sees Dracula as a religious figure because he says that he promised me things not by words but by doing them. So that was a way for him to really, you can see why he was so captivated by Dracula and why.
Yeah, he's a really conflicted character.
He is. But then at the end, like where he's like, punish me, torture me, but don't kill me with all these victims on my conscience.
Yeah.
Because he's essentially he's betrayed by his master here on Earth in Dracula.
Yeah.
And he believes that he'll be disregarded by God and death.
Well, he believes he's going to hell.
Yeah. So for him, it's like the worst possible way to go out. So.
And you feel that panic in him. It's a real tragic end for him.
Yeah, but brilliant character.
Oh yeah, and you know, the actor who played him, Dwight Fry, he would have made a phenomenal Joker.
Yeah.
Wouldn't he?
Yeah.
First time I saw him as you know the Mad Renfield, I was like, wow, oh my god! Like, I mean, I wonder if even he may have. I know that there was several other parts that influenced the creation of Joker, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was one of them.
Yeah.
Really, I loved the character and the portrayal. But speaking of loving the character and the portrayal, Bela Lugosi, Dracula. Again, like Renfield, whenever he's on the screen, I sit up and pay attention, just captivated by he had such a natural charisma. His eyes, his voice, the way he moved, like the way when Renfield, you know, is in his castle and he just glides over to Renfield and just stares down. Such subtle movements that like another actor, you know, wouldn't look in any way impressive at all. Like we were saying earlier, there's no music; it's all him. I mean, obviously, you know, Fry as well, and the set helps, the costume helps, but that's an amazing performance.
Even like when he sees the cut on Renfield's finger, you see he's got his zones in.
Yeah.
It's instantly that opportunity, like he just zones in on it. But he's also he's very methodical. Then like he really plans well. Like like Renfield assures him that like my visit has been kept secret. You know, so everything has been followed. All the instructions have been followed to a T. So he's very calculated as well. Like he makes these plans well in advance in the way he wants things to go forward, you know.
Yeah, it's true, but then you wonder, like, the end, he kind of didn't really think forward to the whole morning thing. Like,
well, I don't think he anticipated that Van Helsing was going to figure out all that, you know.
But like, he's literally living next door.
No, but I don't think he was going to figure out that.
Well, I was, but
he goes back to the coffin, like, you know.
He didn't anticipate it, but I mean, but he knew Van Helsing knew a lot about him and about vampires. Like, he knew about the wolfsbane, he knew about the crucifix, the mirror. Like and Van Helsing doesn't like learn that at any point. I mean, like I was saying earlier, like it's not knowledge that he's studied, or he just seems to have that knowledge. Maybe Dracula doesn't think about that. It just seems a little bit of an oversight that he just kind of goes to bed. Obviously, he has to.
I think, to be honest, I think maybe Dracula felt the end was near for him, because I think that's possibly one of the reasons why he kills Renfield, is almost in frustration. That everything is nearing the end for him.
You could be right. That could be it.
But he also there's always like something behind his words, like Joe when he says like, "I never drink wine."
Yeah.
Or he says, he says there are far worse things awaiting man than death.
Yeah.
I was wondering, was he referring to kind of the torture of immortality as well?
I think so. I think that's what he's talking about. The death is a release. You know, the I mean,
it's after that.
And maybe there's a suggestion, that he
that's what I was wondering.
Would like to die, which might tie in with your theory that maybe not that he wanted death, but maybe he accepted death at the end. That's an interesting theory, actually. I didn't hit me, but when you say it, it makes sense. But yeah, I did agree that line about there are far worse things than death, and also the poem when he recites, when Lucy starts it and he finishes it, like he's clearly a very well read,
intelligent individual.
I thought it was really, really great performance, and obviously a great character.
Even just as well, just like in how he walks as well. Like again, like the kind of character, he's methodical. The way he moves, it's all kind of very deliberate, kind of
Yeah.
specific. But yeah, no, really good character, and I think him and Renfield were the two stars.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. We can move on to Frankenstein.
Yeah, Frankenstein.
So I have the Baron, Elizabeth, Henry, and the creature.
Yeah, I didn't know much of the Baron, but he's hilarious.
He's so funny.
great lines.
I think I laughed at every scene he's in, except for the ending, obviously. Even though he is funny in that as well, but I was too upset to laugh.
What was the hit with Herr Vogel when he's coming in? Do you know?
Oh,
he's
yeah,
like, what does that man want? Do you know that whole?
It's so dismissive.
Yeah.
As I said, like he is some great lines. He's exactly what I'd expect a 19th century German baron to look and act like.
Yeah. Or when he walks into to where Henry's working, he sees the kind of the torch on the ground. He's like, what's going on? Trying to burn the place down now, or something.
Very witty.
He's so oblivious to everything that's going on, like but he's comic relief, which
he is. It's just funny because he's also. I mean, obviously he's a very like I don't say foreboding, but a very kind of like a powerful character. Like I mean, he demands great respect from everybody around him.
Yes, yeah.
And you can imagine him getting really furious and not want to be in his way, and that comes across well in the portrayal as well. Oddly for me, I got a weird sense of David Lynch from him. Have you ever seen David Lynch act?
No, which guy's David Lynch?
David Lynch, the director. He did Twin Peaks and no, that's David Cronenberg.
Sorry.
David Lynch did
Twin... Oh yeah, Twin Peaks. I had never seen him act, I don't think. Maybe I have, I don't know.
Mulholland Drive and stuff like that, Yeah, he acts in Twin Peaks actually. And he has that kind of actually in Twin Peaks he's quite a humorous character. And there's like a weird I don't know, maybe it was just kind of weird connection in my head, but just there was a semblance of his character Cole, I think his name is, in Twin Peaks in the barn there. But yeah, I know I really enjoyed his character, even though he's not a very likable character in some ways. Like for example, when he says like when they're drinking or toasting Victor at the before the wedding, and like they bring out the bottle of wine, like a 100-year-old wine or something like that, and then he goes, just which is quite hilarious in itself, but he says, just give the servants champagne, this would be wasted on them. So he's so dismissive of the servants, which it is like obviously I'm not a fan of people looking down on others. It
was a funny line,
but it's a funny line, and but it's also hilarious that he would think that champagne was fine, like it's just champagne, that's nothing, but this stuff is truly special, so I won't waste that on them. But yeah, no, I thought he was, and actually much needed comic relief. It needed that moments of break, because it's a very dark film.
It's not a character you'd expect, but he's a welcome character.
Yeah, very welcome, very welcome. Elizabeth.
Yeah.
You want to start?
Well, it's weird because I kind of feel like her and Victor and even the professor, they kind of represent, almost subconsciously represent, the side of Victor that's telling why they shouldn't be doing this. They're the voices of reason, but also the voices of support. They never, particularly Elizabeth, she never wanes from her support to Henry. Sorry, in supporting him and being with him. She's very loyal to him. And even then it's interesting how she kind of senses that something, is going to happen later in the film when the monster does, of course, come in and attack. She can sense something's going to happen, try and come between them.
Yeah, no, I agree. She is the humanity that Victor has left behind, and then when he stops his quest, his search for a way to reverse death, he comes back and he's this different person around her, and he's back at humanity again.
You wonder if they had done, spoilers if you haven't read the book, but if she had been killed by the monster, it would have made it more tragic, and that part of his life, that pure part of his life, with her, because she's like completely innocent and all that, you know what I mean? It would have
Oh
been
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it would have been a more
She's completely
impactful.
innocent. Innocent. I'll be honest. Again, like Mina and Lucy, they're more plot points than interesting characters.
Mm.
They're just there for Henry to respond to, or the creature to endanger. But she's not really a developed character in herself.
I found her more engaging though than the other two.
Than Mina.
Yeah, I found the actress who played Elizabeth
I'm
more.
not saying she did a bad job or
Yeah.
anything. It's just
No, I'm just saying
she
that.
wasn't given
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, there's only a certain amount she could do with what
Like
she
she acted
had.
well. Like
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I mean, she portrayed it as definitely as best she could. There's nothing against her performance. I just thought there's not a lot of. I mean, she's there. She's pleading with Victor to come home, and then he does, and then she's telling him he's worried. She's worried about the wedding, and then she's attacked. That's it really, for her in the film, right? I mean, there's not a whole lot going on. But I thought she was portrayed well. Do you want to talk about Victor and the doctor?
Well, I said they're
We
kind
can
of.
discuss.
Well,
Yeah,
just their
Victor
other.
doesn't really do much. The
He
doctor.
seems to be into Elizabeth though. Like he has.
Yeah,
Kind of,
that's weird. They
yeah.
dropped that. Like it's clear that he likes
He
her.
does.
I'll
He
do
kinda
anything
says
for
it,
you.
like, he kind
And
of
then
says
he's
it.
best man
Yeah.
of Henry.
Well, Henry obviously has a lot of respect for him because he says, "I leave her in your care." If
Yeah,
something happens to
and
me.
he even emphasizes in all respects. In other words, marry her when I'm
Yeah.
gone, which is sort of the last reference to that. Yeah, he definitely has a kind of an unrequited love going on. The doctor, though, I agree with you that he's supposed to represent the humanity that Victor is leaving behind when he's experimenting in this macabre and horrific way. But he seems to be as fascinated as Victor afterwards. Like he's experimenting on him further, it seems, after the creature doesn't die. And then he's going to dissect him. And the way he's so dismissive of the creature as well, calling him an animal and saying, just kill him, just put him down. There's nothing about, let's study him. Let's see if he has a spark of humanity, maybe a soul even. There's no, he just wants to just kill it straight away.
Yeah.
And I think he deserves to die.
Maybe. I don't know.
That's how I feel on him anyway. We're going to Henry?
I just said that I feel like he's kind of like, as well, kind of represents the past versus Henry, looking to the future as well.
I see that,
there's
definitely.
a kind of a parallel there as
I
well.
feel like this maybe, I think the Doctor, more so than Henry, I feel is kind of that Antonio vibe going on again. Merchant of Venice Antonio vibe.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to throw that in as well.
Okay.
The monster?
Oh, you want to go to creature first? Okay.
I think I don't know with the Dracula last, but I think Frankenstein is the main character. I think.
Okay, all right.
I don't know. What do you think?
For me, I know you're saying that Henry is.
I also think like
more
I love
of the film.
Obviously we'll talk about the monster in a second. I do love Boris Karloff, but I kind of his name won't come to me. We watched a documentary the other night, last night. But the guy who plays Frankenstein, I think, is phenomenal.
Yeah, no,
I think he's the star of the film. I think Boris Karloff does a really good job as a monster, but I think for me, that's kind of why I wanted to leave it to last.
Okay, we'll go into creatures.
I don't mind. They're both.
It's fine. We won't argue about it.
It's apples and oranges, I guess.
Yeah.
They're both.
Okay, so the creature is a tortured soul. Like in the film, he only lashes out once he's been threatened. Fritz comes in with a torch, and so he gets violent.
Okay.
Then afterwards, at the bottom, when he's down in the cellar, and Fritz is torturing him horrifically, he fights back and he kills Fritz.
Yeah.
Then they're trying to kill him, so he fights back. Then the doctor tries to dissect him, killing him, and he kills the doctor.
I don't think they were trying to kill him when he came out of the room. They were just trying to.
Yes, they were. He said, "Put him down like an animal, kill him." And Henry's like, "Okay." They get the needle. They intend to kill him. That was the whole point.
At that point, they were just trying to.
No.
They were trying to.
No, Henry agrees that okay, we got to kill him. He's killed somebody now. He's killed Fritz. We got to put him down. That's it. They're going to kill him. And then the doctor writes in his notes, every time I try the thing, with the potion, he keeps coming back. I'll have to dissect him. And he kills the doctor because he's literally about to chop him up into pieces. He goes off then, he meets the little girl, Maria. Maria, he was playing with her, and the idea of floating is what he understands. Again, we've established he's maybe a week old at this stage, and he throws her into the river, expecting her to float, and she doesn't. You see the horror on his face when he realizes that he has caused her pain, and only then, after that, he violence on Elizabeth.
Yeah, who did nothing to him.
Yes.
That's the point I was making.
Yeah,
So he does, like...
As I say, yeah, but he it's not. Did he pick any random woman?
No, just because you said that all his attacks
No,
are done
yeah,
in defense.
I said up until a point,
Oh.
all of them are until Elizabeth. But Elizabeth is Victor's fiance. Like, he's
Henry.
not picking a random woman. He didn't attack any other women, in the village. He didn't go for any of the maids. He went for her because he wanted to hurt Henry. Even sorry, he wanted to hurt Henry. And then afterwards, the people he kills in the hill or attacks, their mob chasing him. Now I understand why they're chasing him, obviously, because he caused the death of a child. I mean, I totally get that. But he's again fighting back because they're trying to kill him, and then they burn him alive. He throws Henry out, who absolutely deserves to die. I mean, I don't see how he's not a monster. He's a creature.
He does have monstrous moments, though. Again, it's just opinion. Like, I mean, your opinion.
What does he do besides attack Elizabeth that is monstrous?
That is like...
Besides that, that's like one scene in the entire film, and that's after he's been tortured. Remember, like, he's been brought back to life. He's been tortured. He's been dismissed as nothing, an animal, trying to be put down twice by his creator and by his creator's teacher. He tries to interact with humanity, and it goes horribly wrong. And he's a week old. Can't you understand? He'd have a moment of... And he doesn't even kill her. It's not as if he kills her. He scares her. Do we even know what he does in the room?
Calm down. It's just opinion. Jeez.
I'm not attacking you. I'm defending the creature.
Yeah, I'm not saying that that he starts off and he's not at all. I'm not saying at the start he's not. And actually, there is some really nice moments with him with the lice and with Frankenstein. Between the two of them, there's kind of a tenderness there. It's only when Fritz comes in with the torch that it kind of escalates into
he's not a
misunderstanding. I wonder what would have happened if he hadn't. I always wonder what would have happened if Fritz hadn't come in, because Henry was very pleased with how he was engaging with him, and yeah, again, I would have been curious to see what would have happened if he hadn't come in with the torch, how things would have gone. I think people wouldn't have been willing to accept him anyway, even if Henry would. Just of how he looked,
Yeah, no, I think people would have been horrified.
It was always going to end tragic for him,
Yeah, no, it was always, yeah.
But then obviously as well, like, yeah, he's like a child when he kind of meets Maria, and there's a kind of happiness and glee, playing with her, and then he kind of, in trying to kind of enhance the sense of fun and enjoyment, he makes a tragic mistake of throwing her in the water, not realizing that she's liable to drown. And then, as you mentioned, there's that kind of fear and confusion in his face, not understanding why she's not coming back up, But then obviously, then you have the attack, as I'm saying, on Elizabeth, and you see there is a bit of that monster now coming out of him, why people are afraid of him. A bit of it kind of comes true,
We don't actually see what he does in that room though. Like, he just walks in.
He does pass out though.
He's still, passing out. But like, I mean, like.
Well, obviously, he did something. He wasn't intending to say hi. How are you?
I know, but like, do you not think the sight of him would have caused her to pass out anyway?
Yeah, but I think he was intended to do something to make her feel.
I mean, that's the suggestion I took from it. But he doesn't kill her. He doesn't even hurt her. I don't think. She just passes out. Like, she's not. Like, he didn't rip an arm off or like cause her to have a severe injury or anything. She just passed out, probably from shock. But I agree that is a moment where he turns, and you can understand. And also the villagers, you can totally understand why they're horrified.
Oh yeah,
by
because
him.
like they've obviously she's been killed, but also then when they've seen like, oh, something's happened with Elizabeth, from their point of view, you can see why they're terrified and think, okay, this creature is
Yeah, a menace. Yeah,
yeah.
and then they feel it has to be killed. I
Um,
understand where the mob are coming
I
from.
liked it that there was that contrast. So you have the scene where he's looking his hands up at the light, and then his hands out to Frankenstein,
Yeah.
and then the next scene where they chain him up and his hands are up, but
Mm.
he's in captivity, and he's
Yeah.
trying to, it's almost like trying to get that freedom back, which is kind of cool.
And yes, cool and cruel.
Hmm.
um, yeah, no, I thought Karloff put in a phenomenal performance. Again, he's no words in this film.
And they mention that during the making of it, he had to keep doing the take where he drags
Oh,
the,
yeah,
what was his name
I
again? The
can't
actor who
remember
played
the guy who plays
Frankenstein.
Henry up the hill at the very end
Yes,
when
they
he
keep
knocks
doing
him
that
out.
take, and he had to get back surgery
Yeah,
because
like
of it.
3
So
back surgeries
he
afterwards.
really paid the
Also, like
price
the
for the
makeup,
physicality.
was
Yeah.
excruciating as well because it was really
Mhm.
early form of makeup and they didn't have the latex and stuff like that we have now.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you want to Henry?
yeah, okay.
So yeah, I think the actor who played Henry is fantastic, and I
Mm.
think just even before we get to like in the film, before we get to the monster, stuff with Henry is he's such an interesting character, and the fact that he so there was one of the first lines he has is it's just resting, waiting for a new life to come, and the way he's kind of treasuring the coffin that has the corpse in it, like it's a kind of a trophy or a prize. And there's all that talk of like people accusing him of being crazy and how he's so adamant to defend that. But I think what's really interesting is the reaction he has. So Victor says, "You're crazy, Henry," and he doesn't get angry. He just looks at him and he does this silence, and he's like, "Crazy, am I?" And you see a look in his eyes. That almost kind of signifies how crazy he does become at one point in trying
Yeah,
to
but
go through with his.
I agree, and like he is off from the start. Like we spoke
Mm,
earlier about the grave digging
yeah,
scenes
it's like, what are you
and
doing?
collecting the gallows. But even like the doctor says at one point that he's trying to get his bodies and he doesn't care about what means.
Yes, he
Is there a
does.
suggestion that he's killing people? Like I'd probably not, but
I didn't get that,
I
but he's
wondered.
and obviously illegally like
Oh
digging
yeah,
up
and then he
graves.
steals the brain,
Yeah,
and or he gets Fritz to steal the brain,
yeah.
and then of course there's normal brain and criminal brain,
Mm.
and I thought it was I meant to bring this up actually with the creature, but it was very fascinating that the brain that Fritz selects is the criminal brain, but he never acts criminal. Well, maybe you'll disagree, but for me, he never acts criminally until pushed to breaking point.
Yeah, that was interesting that he wasn't like bad from the get go.
Yeah, like he's not like
Mm.
some evil monster straight away. He's an innocent soul who's reaching up to the light and then is terrified by flames and then
Because
torture.
it was though interesting though because he says I knew you should know, doctor. It was from your laboratory. I took the brain. He's like,
Mm.
the brain that was stolen from my laboratory was a criminal brain.
Yes, yeah,
And Henry kind of takes a moment, kind of where
yeah.
he's like,
What have I done?
yeah, just for a second, like,
Yeah,
um, but even then, like it kind of like in the book as well. There's this thing where he wants to kind of achieve this level of like, um, you know, being championed as this
yeah.
great
He's
man
an
who's made
egomaniac.
discovery. Yeah, he wants to kind of the glory and to be
Yeah,
respected at this
yes,
on this pedestal. Um, Even then, Joey says like when he's like, with my own hands, marveling over his abilities.
mm.
It's a prelude to the line about now I know what it feels like to be God.
Which I mean, as you said earlier, his performance is excellent. It is, and in that scene in
Oh, I love
particular,
that line.
it
Yeah,
is enrapturing.
yeah.
Like you just like you can't help but
But
you're not gonna look away during that scene.
it's like there's a surge of like just pleasure and kind of he's on a high when that moment when he says that, just the way he turns back and just kind of just in ecstasy,
Yeah,
at what he's
yeah.
done.
You can see just like there's just
Mm.
his body can't contain the emotions he's feeling at that point. Where
And
to him, he's almost surpassed humanity,
Mm.
gone to
But
the next level, gone
but
to
as
godhood.
well, noticed as well is when the body goes up, when there's a storm and they move the body up to the top of with the roof, there's a little opening. Do you remember that bit?
Yeah.
And there's like the you hear the thunder and everyone's kind of flinching. But if you look at Frankenstein, he's looking up and he never moves once, he just keeps his eyes on it
Mm.
the whole time. It's kind of concentration, where everyone else in the room, Victor and Elizabeth and I think the professor, they're all kind of flinching at times, and he just kind of keeps a stare, looking up.
Completely focused.
Yeah, completely.
Something, just one thing, just kind of slightly changing topic for a second. We never mentioned it beforehand, but the set design of the laboratory was amazing.
Yeah,
Truly
really,
incredible.
good.
Like, just it would hold up today, no problem. And I think they've reused it for decades later. They said in so many different sequels and other films. Just while we were on the laboratory, I wanted to bring that in because I forgot to mention earlier. The set was phenomenal.
Yeah, no, it was really good. It's interesting that it's when Fritz is killed that he really kind of realizes the consequences of the actions and how extreme and real they are, and how tragedy is very much going to be at the forefront of this, because he does kind of says, like, he laments over Fritz and that Fritz has been killed. I think that's
for maybe a minute.
No, he does, because he's kind of after it, he's kind of passed out, and he said Fritz. What else is interesting as well, though, is that when the professor says that, like, they're gonna have to put it down or go through that, and he says, but he does say, well, that's murder. Like, he does kind of, there is a moment where he's like, it's murder if we kill it.
Yeah.
So he is kind of showing it not as a thing, or as a person.
He still agrees to it.
I know he does. On this time, I thought that was interesting. Aspect.
Oh,
to the character.
He has phenomenal philosophical concepts like that he's talking about and going into earlier, even before the experiment actually takes place, and he's discussing why he's doing what he's doing. Like, they didn't say I'm mad, but, like, I want to know what makes the flowers bud. What is death? I mean, he's fascinated by these concepts, and they are really interesting concepts.
Wasn't it? Yeah, that was the line. It's like one crazy person, three very sane individuals, or something like that.
Was it viewers or something like that? Spectators.
Spectators, yeah. And then also, what's interesting is, so do you know when they're given the toast, to the son of the House of Frankenstein? I don't know, maybe you didn't notice it, but you see in his face, he kind of has this look of, like, almost guilt, and it's like some of the stuff I have done, the last, whatever, how long it was, maybe a month ago, some of the stuff I've done, am I deserving of this praise? Like, these people don't know some of the stuff I've done. I thought it was, again, another aspect to his character was not very, very interesting.
I did not see that. I did not get that at all.
I did. I saw it in his face.
I'm not saying that's not there, but I never noticed it. But, like, because I'll be honest, I felt the exact opposite. I felt like, once he came back and he's sitting with Elizabeth in the garden, he was like, "Oh yes, of course, I was acting very silly there for a while."
Not there.
No understanding of the. I know you're saying it's not. It was later at the toast. What I'm saying is, I had gotten the feeling from him that he. To be honest, for me, I got written here is like that. He exemplified the kind of spoiled, upper class, rich people that just go and do whatever they want and then don't have to worry about the repercussions of their actions. Like, he's broken the law. He's stolen brains, desecrated graves. He created life, dismissed it, caused the death of his colleague, Fritz, and then obviously his doctor. And then it's like, oh yeah, let's go get married. Oh, he doesn't know about the doctor at that point. But it's like, oh, I'll go get married. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, grand, no worries. I feel he's a horrific character in my eyes. He is the villain of the
well, that's what they often say, is the Frankenstein is the monster himself.
He is a monster.
But for me, though, that character is the star. I think he's a fantastic character. Which is why I wanted to talk about him last. But I think the actor who played him was unreal.
I agree that he's a really great character, and I agree the actor was excellent. I do think that he is horrific, though, and I think that I was sickened that he survived and he had a happy life with Elizabeth. Oh yeah,
I was glad he survived. I don't know why. I was glad he survived.
I said, like, earlier with the music, like, it really angered me, and like it ends on a joke after we see the creature burning to death. It does reinforce the attitude of that class of people, though, how they think of others. It's just, it's not even, like the way they thought about Irish people or black people. They're not real humans. Their lives aren't worth the same.
On that, you ready to vote?
Yeah.
Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
I can go first. Um, Again, it is close. Both films have two phenomenal characters for me: Renfield and Dracula, the creature and Henry. Um, uh, I think I have to go. The character I was most invested in, and you probably noticed that already, it was the creature. Um,
I thought you were going to say Renfield, to be honest.
well, Renfield and the creature are the two characters for me that stand out among the whole film. The most. They're the 2. I mean, Henry and Dracula are fantastic as well. Like, I mean, they are the four that like they make both films. But the two that I was enraptured by the most, I feel Dracula maybe suffers a bit because it's such a huge part of pop culture. But the story of Frankenstein is the thing. I think Frankenstein is a better film.
I agree. I think it is a better film.
And the story of the creature and the story of Renfield are actually quite similar. They go on similar paths, innocent starting off and then descend into horror. But creature seals it more than Renfield, so I go with Frankenstein.
I'll have this. Yeah. So for me, it was again, it was Renfield and Dracula, and then Frankenstein and the creature or the monster, whatever we want to call it. Those were the four great characters in the two films. But Henry was the character I enjoyed the most, so I think Henry is what gives it to Frankenstein. Frankenstein gives it to Frankenstein.
Okay, so that's 4-2. Frankenstein takes it over Dracula. A very close fought battle, though.
Yeah, the characters were very close in particular.
Because I mean, Dracula is what a character he is. Obviously, I think it does suffer from the fact that we're, for me personally, definitely it suffers from the fact that I'm so familiar with the character. Like, it's the first time I've seen this film, as I've said, but I mean, I know that character inside and out. And that's probably why Renfield grabbed me more so. Like, I'd love to go in blind and see this film. I mean, it's obviously impossible in this day and age, but it would be very interesting to see how different my reaction would be.
It's interesting as well because, like, you know, obviously Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff are you know, the stars of the movies, and they were both fantastic, really good jobs. But like Renfield and Frankenstein, for me, I think were the two best characters from the two films. It's just interesting, you know.
Yeah, I would go with Renfield. I feel like I think it's closer. I get what you're seeing in Henry. Like, I mean, I see it as well. I think we disagree on how we feel about the character, but we both identify the character as great. I think there's even because the creature isn't in as much as obviously as Frankenstein is, but there's a subtlety to Karloff's performance, and there's a tragedy to the story of his character that I just couldn't help but feel for him. It's interesting. Like, I often wonder what was the view of the director Whale and the writer. I mean, I haven't read Mary Shelley's book, so I'm not sure. But
I read the book.
Even I know you have, but even with her, I wonder to her was Victor. In the book, obviously, he's Victor. To her, was Victor the monster?
Well, when I studied it, like I studied it in the States, we did talk about like how Victor, in many ways, is that's Victor's name in the novel, obviously, that he is the villain, and that the monster is the tragic figure, and that he's driven to become a monster himself because of what he goes through with Victor, and also the fact that, like, he in the novel he meets a family and he kind of befriends.
I don't get too many spoilers because I do want to read it at some point.
Okay.
But basically, would you feel that Shelley intended him to be the monster or Victor? Or both?
It's hard to say.
It's left up for debate.
Yeah,
okay.
I'd say a bit of both.
Okay, I'm just fascinated by whether, like, because I think, definitely Merchant of Venice one I often go back to, and I've mentioned it twice already tonight. But like Shakespeare did not intend people to empathize with Shylock, because when he wrote that, it was totally acceptable to hate Jewish people, to openly hate Jewish people. Like it was totally fine. There was no problem. So by making Shylock Jewish, it was like actually an easy way to get the audience to hate him. But we thankfully don't have those prejudices. So we just see a character who, one, we know has had a sad history, even back then. I mean, the Jews have had a long, sad history. But that he's, being looked down upon. I think if you see that coming in again, I hate when people look down on others, like as if they're better than them. And obviously, our class structure is very different now than it was back then, and we don't accept that certain classes are better than others. And Antonio was a different class to Shylock, so he was better than him. Henry is a different class to the creature, so he's better than him. Or even Fritz. Like, if Henry had died the way Fritz had died, it would have been way more of a hoopla made. Because Fritz isn't worth as much, even though I do think Fritz was a horrific character.
He brought it on himself.
He absolutely did. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there is that emotion, and it's interesting to think, excuse me, was the author's intention, or the writer's intention, or the creator's intention the same as how we take it now? It's interesting to think about.
No, yeah.
But on that, we'll leave it for tonight. This episode. Next week we have
Friday the 13th versus A Nightmare on Elm Street. This is again going on a completely different,
full-blown slasher gore.
I often would I guess he is. I was going to say, is Freddy a slasher? I guess he is.
Yeah, running around chasing a load of teens. I mean, you can't have that not be a slasher.
But yeah, no, I'm actually looking forward to that. It's going to be such a different change of pace.
It certainly is.
To what we did this week.
And even very much change of pace, even compared to last week as well. Yeah. I mean, these are very different films.
Completely. A different era and everything, a different style.
Which is which should be clear now. This is coming up next week. It's the third week of our horror fest. We're trying to dip in around different eras, different genres, different types of horror films. Some are, like last week, have really kind of excellent dramatic vein running through it and phenomenal performances. This, we're going back to the beginning and the subtlety of early classic
genesis of horror,
and then we're going into 80s splatterfest, 80s horror kind of at its
pomp.
Yeah. Certainly among its popular format at its peak. So I'm looking forward to it. Liam is definitely more familiar with the films than I am, even though I have seen both.
But it's always, when you watch them under this lens, though, it's always different.
It is always different. It is always different. Yeah, I haven't watched a film yet for this, and not kind of made a revelation in my head about something that I hadn't thought of beforehand.
But see, and there's even stuff like that you might have wanted it, or you might have talked about before, but it never really came up. Or now you're looking at certain characters in a certain way, and you're throwing stuff and saying, "What did you think of that?" Or you can look at things.
Yeah, you're pushing yourself to
ask
analyze
people to see how they look at it.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Join us next week for more fun, more analysis.
We hope you enjoyed this, and we didn't ramble on a little too long at the end.
Ramble on, as Robert Plant would say. But yeah, okay. So until
next week, we'll leave it there. So
we'll leave it there. So.